The cathedral bells echoed through Manhattan's elite district as Ethan Vell adjusted his platinum cufflinks one final time. 10 years of meticulous planning had led to this moment. Every hostile takeover, every strategic alliance, every sleepless night spent building his empire had served one purpose: destroying Leonard Delacroix, the man who had murdered his family's legacy, standing at the altar in his tailored Armani tuxedo. Ethan's steel-gray eyes remained fixed on the massive oak doors at the cathedral's entrance. The assembled crowd of New York's most powerful families whispered behind their programs, calling it the wedding of the century, a union that would end the most bitter corporate feud in Wall Street history. They had no idea they were witnessing the final act of his revenge. The doors opened, and Isabelle Delacroix appeared in a vision of ivory silk and Belgian lace. Dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her chocolate-brown eyes met his across the cathedral's length. She walked alone down the aisle, her father having refused to give her away to his sworn enemy, even for the sake of their strategic merger. Ethan's jaw tightened as he watched her approach. She was more beautiful than he remembered from their carefully orchestrated public appearances during their whirlwind engagement. But beauty was irrelevant. She was Leonard's daughter, and that made her both his weapon and his target. When she reached the altar, Isabelle lifted her veil and looked directly into his eyes. There was no fear there, no uncertainty, only a quiet acceptance that unsettled him more than any tears would have. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, his voice carrying across the packed cathedral. The ceremony proceeded like a perfectly choreographed performance. Ethan recited his vows with the same cold precision he used in boardroom negotiations, his voice never wavering as he promised to love and cherish the daughter of the man he despised most in the world. When it was Isabelle's turn, her voice was soft but steady. "I promise to stand by you, Ethan, through whatever comes. To give you all of myself, completely and without reservation." Her words carried an undertone that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. He pushed the feeling aside. This was business, nothing more. The ring exchange was swift, efficient. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan leaned down to kiss his new bride. It was meant to be brief, perfunctory, for the cameras. But when his lips met hers, something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with his carefully laid plans. He pulled back quickly, disturbed by his body's betrayal. The reception at the plaza was a masterpiece of opulence and restraint. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in the finest linens, while a string quartet played classical arrangements. Ethan played his role flawlessly, the devoted groom who had somehow managed to bridge the gap between two warring dynasties. Leonard Delacroix sat at the head table, his weathered face a mask of barely contained fury. Every smile he forced for the cameras was a grimace of defeat. Ethan savored each uncomfortable moment his new father-in-law endured. "Congratulations," Leonard said, when the cameras weren't rolling, his voice dripping with venom as he approached. "Ethan near the bar. You think you've won something, don't you?" Ethan's smile was razor-sharp. "I've won everything, Leonard. Your daughter, access to your company's board, and most importantly, it's the perfect position to watch your empire crumble from the inside." "Isabelle is stronger than you think," Leonard warned. "She's not the fragile flower you believe her to be." "We'll see," Ethan replied coolly, watching as his new wife gracefully navigated conversations with their guests across the room. She seemed to glow under the attention, but he noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes. As the evening wound down, Ethan and Isabelle made their rounds, accepting congratulations and well wishes. She remained poised throughout, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they moved from group to group. To everyone watching, they looked like a couple deeply in love. The irony wasn't lost on him. Finally, the last guest departed. They were alone in the back of his Bentley, heading to his penthouse. The partition was up, giving them privacy from his driver. The silence stretched between them as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. "The performance is over," Ethan said finally, loosening his tie. "You can drop the act now." Isabelle turned to look at him, her wedding dress rustling against the leather seats. "What act?" the blushing bride, the loving wife. We're alone now. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his profile in the dim light. Is that what you think this was? It's an act? Her question caught him off guard. It expected relief, maybe. Even defiance, now that the public facade was no longer necessary. Instead, she seemed genuinely curious about his answer. What else would it be? He asked, his voice harder than necessary. Isabel turned back to the window, watching the city pass by. I suppose we'll find out. When they arrived at his penthouse, Ethan watched as she took in the stark modern space. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Manhattan. But the apartment itself was cold, all sharp angles and expensive minimalism. It reflected nothing of warmth or personality. Much like himself, he realized Isabel slipped off her heels and walked barefoot across the marble floor to the windows. Her reflection looked fragile against the backdrop of the glittering city, but there was something in her posture that suggested hidden strength. It's beautiful, she said, without turning around. It's strategic, he corrected. The best view of the city I intend to own. She turned then, and the look in her eyes made his breath catch. There was no judgment there, no fear of his ambitions. Only a deep sadness that seemed to reach right into his chest and squeeze. Ethan, she said quietly, walking toward him. I need you to know something. He stood perfectly still as she approached, every instinct telling him to maintain distance. But she didn't stop until she was close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume, could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. I know why you married me, she whispered, placing her hand gently on his chest. I know this is about revenge. The admission should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the ground shifting beneath his feet. Ethan's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment before he regained his composure. Then you know this marriage is purely transactional. I know that's what you tell yourself, Isabel replied, her hand still resting over his heart. But I also know something else. He wanted to step back, to put distance between them, but something in her voice held him frozen in place. What? I know that you've been watching me for months before you proposed, not for business reasons, but because you were trying to understand me. Her fingers moved slightly against his chest, and he could feel his pulse quickening. You had. Your investigators gather information about my daily routines, my favorite coffee shop, the books I read, but you never acted on any of it until now. The accuracy of her observation sent a chill down his spine. She was right. He had been watching her, studying her, telling himself it was purely strategic intelligence gathering. But somewhere along the way it had become something else entirely. That was research, he said, his voice lacking its usual conviction. Was it research when you sent flowers to my apartment after my mother's death anniversary? Anonymous flowers that happened to be her favorite white roses? Ethan's jaw tightened. May have done that on impulse, a moment of weakness when he'd seen her leaving the cemetery with tears streaming down her face. He'd told himself it was about maintaining her emotional stability for the long-term plan. Or when you anonymously paid for the medical bills of my old nanny when she couldn't afford her heart surgery. Isabel continued, her voice growing softer. I traced the payment, Ethan. It came from an account you thought I'd never connect to you. You're imagining connections that don't exist, he said, but his voice had lost all its authority. Isabel smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. It transformed her face completely, making her look younger and infinitely more dangerous to his carefully guarded heart. Am I? Then why are your hands shaking? He looked down and realized she was right. His hands, which had remained steady through hostile corporate takeovers and billion-dollar negotiations, were trembling. He clenched them into fists. This doesn't change anything, he said harshly. I still intend to destroy your father. I'll use our marriage to gain access to Delacroix Holdings, and then I'll tear it apart piece by piece until he has nothing left. I know, she said simply, and I'll help you do it. The words hit him like a physical blow. What? Isabel turned away from him, walking back to the windows. The city lights cast her silhouette in stark relief against the glass. My father destroyed your family when you were just a child. He bankrupted your parents, caused your mother's death, and left you with nothing but hatred to sustain you. How do you? Because I was there that night when he celebrated crushing the Vale Empire. I was 14 years old, sitting at the top of the stairs, listening to him laugh about how he'd finally eliminated his biggest threat. Her voice carried no emotion, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. He called your father weak, said your mother was pathetic for not being able to handle the real world of business. Ethan felt rage building in his chest, the same rage that had fueled him for over a decade, but underneath it was something new, the realization that Isabel had witnessed his family's humiliation and carried that knowledge all these years. He used me as a pawn my entire life, she continued, controlled every aspect of my existence, from the schools I attended to the friends I was allowed to have. When he arranged this marriage, he thought he was securing an alliance with someone he could eventually manipulate and control. She turned back to him, and the look in her eyes made his breath catch. There was steel there, hidden beneath the surface of her apparent fragility. But what he doesn't know is that I've been planning my own escape for years. I've been moving money into accounts he can't access, gathering evidence of his illegal business practices, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Ethan stared at her in shock. You're saying you want to help me destroy him? I'm saying we want the same thing, Ethan. Freedom from Leonard Delacroix's control. She walked back toward him, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. The difference is that I'm not motivated by revenge. I'm motivated by justice. What's the difference? Revenge is about making him pay for the past. Justice is about preventing him from hurting anyone else in the future. She stopped in front of him again, close enough that he could see the determination. In her eyes, I have evidence that could put him in prison for decades. Financial records, recorded conversations, proof of bribery and extortion. Ethan's mind raced. If what she was saying was true, she was offering him something far more valuable than just access to Delacroix holdings. She was offering him the complete destruction of Leonard Delacroix. Why? He asked. Why would you betray your own father? Pain flashed across her features before she carefully masked it. Because he stopped being my father the day he chose his empire over his family. Guess he drove my mother away and then told me she abandoned us because she was weak. Spent my entire life making me feel like I was nothing more than a tool to be used for his benefit. She reached up and touched his face gently, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. The touch was so unexpected, so tender, that it shattered something inside his chest. But mostly because I've been in love with you since I was 17 years old, and I refuse to let my father use me to hurt you anymore. The confession hung in the air between them like a live wire. Ethan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet, as if everything he thought he knew about this woman in this situation had suddenly been turned upside down. That's impossible, he whispered. Is it? I was at the Hartwell Charity Gala. In 2018, you were there with your business partner, standing by the auction table. You had just started Vale Holdings. And everyone was talking about the mysterious young entrepreneur who had appeared out of nowhere. Her fingers moved to trace his lower lip, and he found himself unable to breathe. I watched you all night. You looked so determined, so focused on your goal. And I thought to myself, that man is going to change the world. Ethan remembered that night. It had been one of his first major social events as a legitimate businessman, his first real step into the world that had rejected his family. He'd been nervous, angry, and determined to prove himself worthy of being there. You were just a teenager, he said weakly. I was 17, and I knew what I felt. Her voice was steady, certain. I went home that night and researched everything I could about you. I followed your career, celebrated your successes, worried when you took risks. I fell in love with your determination, your intelligence, your refusal to give up no matter what the odds. But you never approached me. Never. Tried to contact me. Isabel's smile was sad. How could I? I was Leonard Delacroix's daughter. You would have seen me as the enemy, and you would have been right too. But I never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, our paths would cross. She stepped closer, eliminating the last few inches of space between them. When my father told me about the marriage proposal, I knew it was your revenge plan. I knew you saw me as nothing more than a weapon to use against him. But I also knew it was my only chance to be close to you, to prove that not all Delacroix blood runs poison. Ethan felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling. Everything he thought he knew about this marriage, about her, about his own motivations, was proving to be wrong. The woman standing before him wasn't the sheltered, naive heiress he'd expected to manipulate and discard. She was a strategist, a survivor, and apparently someone who had loved him from afar for years. "This changes everything," he said, his voice barely audible. "Does it?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "Or does it just make you see what was always there?" 3 weeks into their marriage, Ethan found himself in unfamiliar territory. Every morning he woke to find fresh coffee waiting for him, and Isabel quietly reading at the kitchen island, her dark hair catching the morning light. She never demanded his attention or conversation, but her presence had become a constant that both comforted and unsettled him. Their relationship had shifted into something he couldn't quite categorize. They worked together with surprising efficiency, combining his business acumen with her insider knowledge of Delacroix Holdings. She had indeed been gathering evidence against her father for years, and the information she provided was devastating. "These documents show systematic tax evasion going back 7 years, Ethan said, reviewing the files spread across his home office desk. And this recording of him bribing City Planning Commissioner Harrison could end his career. Isabel nodded from where she sat curled in the leather chair across from him. "There's more. He's been using shell companies to hide assets from investors. I have the bank records." "How did you get access to all of this?" "He never saw me as a threat," she said simply. "I was just his quiet, obedient daughter. He had no idea I was documenting everything, waiting for the right moment." Ethan studied her carefully. In the weeks since their wedding night conversation, she had revealed herself to be incredibly intelligent and strategically minded. But she had also maintained a gentleness toward him that he still didn't understand. "Why haven't you used this against him before now?" Isabel set down the financial reports she'd been reviewing. "'Cause I needed someone I could trust to help me. Someone with the resources and motivation to see it through to the end. Leonard Delacroix is a powerful man with powerful friends. Taking him down requires more than just evidence. It requires someone willing to be ruthless," she said, quietly, but not cruel. "There's a difference." Their eyes met across the desk, and Ethan felt that familiar stirring in his chest that happened whenever she looked at him like that, as if she saw something in him that he wasn't sure actually existed. That evening they attended a charity gala where Leonard would also be present. It was their first major social event as a couple since the wedding, and Ethan was curious too. See how Isabel would handle being in the same room as her father while actively plotting his downfall? She was magnificent. Dressed in a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves perfectly, she moved through the crowd with natural grace, our charming donors and socialites with genuine warmth. But Ethan noticed how her smile became cooler whenever Leonard approached, how she positioned herself slightly behind Ethan's shoulder as if seeking protection. "You two look happy," Leonard said when he cornered them near the silent auction tables. His smile was sharp, predatory. "Marriage seems to be agreeing with you, darling." "It is," Isabel replied evenly. "Ethan is a wonderful husband." Leonard's eyes flicked between them, and Ethan could see the man's suspicion. "I hope you're taking good care of my daughter, Vale. She's more precious than you know." The underlying threat was clear, but Ethan met Leonard's gaze steadily. "She's safe with me. See that she stays that way." Leonard's hand landed possessively on Isabel's shoulder, and Ethan saw her stiffen slightly. After all, family is everything. When Leonard walked away, Ethan noticed that Isabel's hands were shaking. Without thinking, he moved closer, his arm sliding around her waist, in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him, and for a moment he saw past her composed facade to the vulnerability beneath. "He scares me sometimes. Even now, even knowing that I have the power to destroy him. He still makes me feel like that frightened little girl who could never do anything right." The admission hit him harder than it should have. "Can't hurt you anymore, Isabel? I won't let him." "Why?" she asked softly. "Because I'm useful to your revenge plan?" The question stopped him cold. Is that why he felt so protective of her? Because she was valuable to his goals? Or was it something deeper? Something he wasn't ready to acknowledge? Before he could answer, the orchestra began playing in couples. Moved onto the dance floor, Ethan found himself offering his hand to Isabel without conscious thought. "Dance with me." She took his hand, and he led her onto the polished marble floor. As they moved together to the slow romantic music, Ethan became acutely aware of how perfectly she fit in his arms, how her body seemed to anticipate his movements before he made them. "You're a good dancer," she said, her voice barely audible over the music. "You sound surprised?" "I didn't think revenge plots included ballroom dancing lessons." Despite himself, he found his lips curving into a smile. "There's a lot you don't know about me. I'd like to learn," she said, and the sincerity in her voice made his chest tighten. As the song ended, Ethan found himself reluctant to let her go. She looked up at him, her brown eyes soft and trusting, and he felt something crack open inside his carefully guarded heart. That night, after they returned home, Isabel disappeared into the master bedroom, while Ethan retreated to his study to review more of the evidence she'd provided. But he found himself unable to concentrate, his mind wandering to the feeling of her in his arms. The way she'd looked at him on the dance floor. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. When he looked up, Isabel was standing in the doorway wearing a silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Can't sleep?" Too much to think about. She moved into the room and he caught the subtle scent of her perfume. "Would you like some tea? I was going to make some for myself." It was such a simple, domestic offer, but it highlighted how isolated he'd become over the years. When was the last time someone had offered to make him tea just because they thought he might want it? That would be nice. She returned a few minutes later with 2 steaming mugs, handing one to him before settling into the chair across from his desk. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their tea and listening to the sounds of the city outside. "Ethan," she said eventually, "what will you do after this is over? After Leonard is destroyed and you've gotten your revenge?" The question caught him off guard. He'd spent so many years focused on the goal of destroying Leonard Delacroix that he'd never really thought about what would come after. "I don't know," he admitted. "I suppose I'll continue building Vale Holdings. And us? What happens to our marriage when you no longer need me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Ethan set down his mug and studied her face. She was trying to look casual, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped her mug a little too tightly. "What do you want to happen?" he asked carefully. Isabel was quiet for a long moment, then set down her own mug and looked directly at him. "I want you to see me as more than just a tool for revenge. I want you to see that what I feel for you is real, even if this marriage started as part of your plan." Her honesty was devastating. Ethan felt the walls around his heart cracking further, letting in emotions he'd kept locked away for years. "Isabel," he began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "You don't have to say anything now. I just wanted you to know that, whatever happens with my father, whatever evidence we use or strategies we employ, I'm not doing this just to escape him. I'm doing this because I believe in you." She stood up, smoothing down her robe. "Good night, Ethan." As she reached the door, he called out to her. "Isabel." She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. "Thank you. For the tea. For everything." Her smile was radiant. "You're welcome." After she left, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the evidence of Leonard Delacroix's crimes spread across his desk. But for the first time in years, revenge wasn't the only thing on his mind. He was thinking about soft brown eyes, gentle hands, and the way it felt to be cared for by someone who asked for nothing in return. He was thinking about the terrifying possibility that his marriage of convenience was becoming something real. 2 months into their marriage, Ethan was forced to confront the fact that his feelings for Isabel had evolved far beyond mere strategic appreciation. He found himself looking forward to coming home to her, to their quiet dinners and late-night conversations. She had become the bright spot in days filled with hostile takeovers and corporate warfare, which made what he discovered on that rainy Thursday morning all the more devastating. His private investigator, Marcus Chen, had been discreetly monitoring Leonard Delacroix's activities to ensure they stayed ahead of any countermoves. But the report Marcus delivered to Ethan's office that morning contained information that made his blood run cold. "You're not going to like this," Marcus said, sliding a thick file across Ethan's desk. "I've been tracking Delacroix's communications, as you requested. 3 days ago, he had a private meeting with someone unexpected." Ethan opened the file and felt his world tilt off its axis. The surveillance photos showed Leonard Delacroix sitting across from FBI Director Sarah Morrison at an upscale restaurant in downtown Manhattan. The timestamp indicated the meeting had lasted over 2 hours. What were they discussing? "I couldn't get audio, but my source at the Bureau says Morrison's been building a case against Vail Holdings for months, specifically looking into your acquisition practices and whether you've been using insider information." Ethan's jaw clenched. His business practices were aggressive, but legal. However, if the FBI started digging deep enough, they might uncover some of the morally gray areas he'd navigated in his quest for revenge. "There's more," Marcus continued reluctantly. "Morrison left the meeting with a briefcase. According to my contact, she submitted several key pieces of evidence to the prosecutor's office the next day." "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records. Internal communications? The kind of detailed insider information that could only come from someone with intimate access to Vail Holdings." The implication hit Ethan like a physical blow. Someone close to him was feeding information to the FBI. Through Leonard Delacroix, someone who had access to his most sensitive business documents and communications. Someone like his wife. That evening, Ethan came home to find Isabel in the kitchen, preparing dinner as she did most nights. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with the genuine smile that had become so precious to him. "How was your day?" she asked, rising on her toes to kiss his cheek. The casual affection that had become natural between them now felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Illuminating. Something in his tone made her pause. She studied his face, concern creeping into her eyes. "Is everything all right?" Instead of answering, Ethan placed Marcus's file on the kitchen counter between them. Isabel's gaze flicked down to it, and he watched carefully for her reaction. What's this?" "Surveillance photos of your father meeting with FBI Director Morrison 3 days ago." His voice was deadly calm. "Apparently, she's building a case against Vail Holdings using insider information." Isabel's face went pale, but her expression remained steady. "I see. Do you?" "Because I'm trying to understand how the FBI could have obtained detailed financial records and internal communications from my company. The kind of information that only someone with intimate access could provide." "Ethan, did you really think I wouldn't find out?" The words erupted from him with years of suppressed pain and betrayal. "Did you think you could play the loving wife while systematically feeding information to my enemies?" Isabel flinched as if he'd struck her. "That's not what happened." "Then explain it to me," he said, his voice growing dangerously quiet. "Explain how the FBI has access to information that only you could have provided." "I can't." The admission was barely above a whisper. The confession hit him harder than any denial would have. For a moment, the kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "I trusted you," he said finally. "I let you into my life, my business, my ... Couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't admit how close he'd come to giving her his heart. Tears began sliding down Isabel's cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. "I know." "Was any of it real? The evidence against your father, your claims about loving me since you were 17, the way you looked at me," his voice cracked slightly on the last words. "It was all real," she said fiercely, taking a step toward him. "Every word I said to you was true, except for the part where you were betraying me to the FBI. I never..." She stopped herself, closing her eyes as if gathering strength. "It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Isabel opened her eyes and looked directly at him. "6 months before you proposed, my father discovered that I'd been gathering evidence against him. He threatened to have you killed if I didn't cooperate with his plans." Ethan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "What?" He knew about my feelings for you. He'd been watching me, tracking my internet searches, monitoring my activities. When he realized I was planning to expose him, he told me that he would arrange for your death to look like an accident unless I helped him destroy you first. So you chose to betray me rather than trust me with the truth. I chose to protect you. The words exploded from her with desperate intensity. He showed me detailed plans, Ethan. Photos of your apartment, your office, your regular routes. He had professional killers on retainer. I couldn't risk your life, not when I could prevent it by cooperating. Ethan stared at her, trying to process what she was telling him. You're saying you've been working with your father all along? I've been giving him carefully selected information that makes you look guilty of minor infractions while protecting your truly sensitive data. She corrected. Every document I passed along was chosen specifically to build a case that would result in fines and regulatory oversight, not criminal charges. You expect me to believe you've been playing both sides? I expect you to believe that I love you? Enough to sacrifice my own integrity to keep you alive, she said, her voice breaking. I've been walking a tightrope for months, trying to give my father enough to satisfy him without actually destroying you. Ethan felt his anger warring with a desperate hope that what she was saying might be true. The evidence against him that you showed me is real. Every piece of it. I was planning to use it to neutralize his threats against you once we were married and I had legal protections as your wife. But the FBI will find evidence of aggressive but legal business practices. Nothing that will result in criminal charges. Just regulatory scrutiny and financial penalties. She took another step toward him, her eyes pleading. I've been protecting you, Ethan, even as I hated myself for deceiving you. He wanted to believe her. Every fiber of his being wanted to accept her explanation and pull her into his arms. But years of betrayal and manipulation had taught him to trust no one completely. How do I know this isn't just another lie? Another manipulation? The question seemed to shatter something inside her. Isabel sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. You don't, she whispered. You have no reason to trust me, and every reason to doubt my motives. But I'm begging you to give me a chance to prove that everything I feel for you is real. Ethan stood frozen, torn between the desire to comfort her and the need to protect himself from further betrayal. Everything he thought he knew about their relationship had been turned upside down once again. I need time to think, he said finally. Isabel nodded without looking up. I understand. I'll pack some things and stay at a hotel until you decide whether you can forgive me, Isabel. She stood up abruptly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. No, it's okay. I know how this looks. I know how many lies I've told you. Even if they were meant to protect you, I don't have the right to ask for your trust anymore. As she walked past him toward the door, Ethan caught her wrist gently. Where will you go? Somewhere safe. Don't worry about me. I will worry about you, he said, the admission surprising them both. Despite everything, I will worry about you. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you, Ethan. I know you. Don't believe me right now, but I need you to know that. Everything I did because I love you. Then she was gone, leaving him alone in the kitchen with the scent of her perfume and the weight of too many unanswered questions. As Ethan stood there in the silence, he realized that his carefully planned revenge had become something far more complicated and dangerous than he'd ever anticipated, because somewhere along the way, he had fallen in love with his enemy's daughter. And now he had no idea who was betraying whom. For 4 agonizing days, Ethan lived in a fog of doubt and longing. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything but the memory of Isabel's tears and her desperate confession that she loved him. His penthouse felt hollow without her presence, every room echoing with her absence. He had Marcus dig deeper into the FBI investigation, cross-referencing every piece of evidence Isabel had provided about her father with independent sources. What he discovered made his chest tighten with a mixture of hope and devastating regret. Every document she'd given him was not only genuine, but strategically chosen to build an airtight case against Leonard Delacroix. More than that, Marcus's. Contacts revealed that the FBI's case against Vale Holdings had been mysteriously dropped after new evidence emerged proving the original accusations were fabricated. On Friday morning, Ethan received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Vale." The voice was unfamiliar, female, nervous. "My name is Sarah Martinez. Work as Leonard Delacroix's personal assistant. I have information you need to hear." "What kind of information?" "It's about your wife. About what she's really been doing these past months." There was a pause. "Can you meet me? It's not safe to talk over the phone?" An hour later, Ethan sat across from a young woman in a downtown coffee shop, her hands shaking as she clutched her cup. "Mrs. Vale saved my life," Sarah began without preamble. "Mr. Delacroix discovered I was pregnant and threatened to fire me because he said I'd become unreliable. Mrs. Vale secretly arranged for me to transfer to a subsidiary company with better benefits and job protection." Ethan leaned forward. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I owe her the truth, and I think you deserve to know what kind of woman you married." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "For the past year, Mrs. Vale has been systematically documenting her father's crimes while simultaneously protecting you from his attempts to destroy you." "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled out a tablet and showed him a series of encrypted files. "Mr. Delacroix has been planning your destruction since before you ever proposed to his daughter. He knew about her feelings for you and intended to use them against both of you." The files revealed a chilling timeline of Leonard's manipulation. He had orchestrated situations to make Ethan notice. Isabel had arranged for certain business opportunities to fall into Ethan's path, even manipulated stock prices to make Ethan's marriage proposal seem strategically advantageous. "Mrs. Vale figured it out," Sarah continued. "She's been playing a double game, feeding her father false information while building a real case against him. Every document she passed to the FBI through him was carefully chosen to clear you while implicating him." "How do you know all this?" "Because she made me her backup plan. If anything happened to her, I was supposed to deliver all of this evidence to you and to the authorities." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "She's been protecting so many people, Mr. Vale. Employees he threatened, business partners he tried to destroy, even competitors he wanted eliminated. She's been using her position to warn them, to help them, to gather evidence of his crimes." Ethan felt the last of his defenses crumbling. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. She hasn't been to any of her usual places. But Mr. Delacroix has been looking for her too. He's furious that the FBI case against you was dropped and suspects she's responsible." That evening, Ethan stood in his penthouse, staring at his phone. He'd been trying to reach Isabel all day, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He was considering hiring a security team to find her when his doorbell rang. When he opened the door, his heart stopped. Isabel stood in the hallway, but she looked nothing like the composed woman who had left 4 days earlier. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, and there was a bruise on her left cheek that made his blood boil. "Jesus, Isabel, what happened to you?" "My father found me," she said quietly, stepping into the apartment. He wasn't pleased about the FBI investigation being dropped. Ethan gently touched the bruise on her face, his jaw clenched with rage. "He hit you. It doesn't matter. I came to give you these." She handed him a thick envelope. "It's everything. You need to destroy him completely. Bank records, recorded conversations, documented evidence of murders he's ordered. I'm leaving the country tomorrow, but I wanted you to have justice first." "Leaving?" The word hit him like a physical blow. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere he can't find me. Somewhere I can start over and stop being a burden to the people I care about." "You're not a burden," Ethan said fiercely. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "Don't say that. Not after everything I've put you through." "I met with Sarah Martinez today," he said, setting the envelope aside and focusing entirely on her. "She told me everything. About how you've been protecting me, about how you figured out your father's manipulation, about how you've been helping people he's threatened. She wasn't supposed to. She was supposed to tell me if something happened to you. You count." Ethan stepped closer, his hands framing her face gently, careful of the bruise. "I know the truth now, Isabel. All of it. How you've been playing the most dangerous game imaginable to protect me while building a case against your own father. It doesn't change the fact that I lied to you. I betrayed your trust. It changes everything, he said firmly, because it proves that every instinct I had about you was right. You're not just beautiful and intelligent, you're brave and selfless and stronger than anyone has any right to be. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan, I love you, he said, the words coming out raw and honest. Not because you're useful to my revenge plans, not because you're convenient, but because you're you. Because you make tea when you're nervous and hum when you're happy, and you somehow managed to see something good in me that I thought died years ago. I love you too, she whispered, so much that it terrifies me. Then stay, he said, pulling her closer. Don't run away from us. Let me protect you for once. My father will be in federal prison by the end of the week, Ethan said confidently. Sarah gave me additional evidence that corroborates everything you've gathered. He's finished, Isabel. He can't hurt you anymore. She searched his eyes, hope and fear warring in her expression. Are you sure you can forgive me? For all the deception, for putting you in danger? There's nothing to forgive, he said, leaning, his forehead against hers. You saved my life in every way that matters. You saved my soul. When he kissed her, it was with all the desperation and relief of a man who had almost lost everything that mattered to him. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands clutching at his shirt as if she couldn't bear to let him go. Marry me, he said against her lips. Isabel pulled back, laughing through her tears. We're already married. Marry me again, he clarified, smiling for what felt like the first time in days. Marry me for real this time, not for revenge or strategy, or business mergers. Marry me because you want to spend your life with me. Yes, she breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. 3 months later, they stood together in a small garden ceremony surrounded by the few people they truly trusted. No media, no business associates, no strategic alliances. Just them and the promise of a future built on love instead of vengeance. Leonard Delacroix was serving consecutive life sentences in federal prison. His empire had been dismantled, with restitution going to his victims. Sarah Martinez now ran a nonprofit funded by Ethan and Isabel that helped employees report corporate misconduct safely as they exchanged new vows in the golden light of sunset. Ethan realized that his quest for revenge had given him something far more valuable than satisfaction. It had given him the love of an extraordinary woman who had chosen to save him, even when it meant destroying her own father. I promise to trust you, he said, slipping a new ring onto her finger. To protect you, to support your dreams, and to love you for all the days of my life. I promise to be honest with you, Isabel replied, her voice steady and strong. To stand by your side through whatever comes, and to love you with everything I am. When they kissed as husband and wife for the second time, it felt like the beginning of everything. The crowd cheered, but all Ethan could hear was the sound of his own heart beating in perfect rhythm with hers. That night, in their penthouse, overlooking the glittering city, Ethan held his wife in his arms and marveled at how completely his life had changed. He had started this journey seeking revenge against his enemy, and had found instead the greatest love of his life.
No more
Secrets, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. No more lies, she agreed, snuggling closer against his chest. Just us. Just us, she confirmed, tilting her head up to smile at him. Forever. Side their windows, Manhattan sparkled with infinite possibilities. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of their family's war, something that would endure long after the memory of old grievances had faded. Their love story had begun with deception and revenge, but it would be remembered for its truth, its courage, and its ultimate triumph over the sins of the past. In the end, the best revenge had been falling in love. The end.